Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Nick Dixon, and this is the show that is informally called Dixon Cox with me and Paul Cox. So it has no formal title, so we don't know what that is or if it'll ever have one. But it's where me and Paul Cox go through the news, and very fittingly, we have Paul Cox to do just that. He's, of course, the star of GB News Headliners. How you doing, Paul?
I'm okay, Nick. It is Dixon. It never changed now. Would you imagine if we just called it something?
We could,
People would just become. It's like I still call X Twitter,
yeah.
so it would stick. Whether we wanted it to or not, whether we came up with a genius new name, Dixon Cox is how it'll always be known. I'm sure.
It should be called something really slick and professional, like News Slam. Welcome to
News.
News Slam, where
I
we
thought you were going to say
slam all the
new.
week's news from an anti-woke, no-holds-barred perspective. Because we're
I
edgy
thought,
8 years after it was safe. You know, one of those kind of like slightly, moderately edgy radio shows. Mike Stevens tells it like it is from 5 till 7. While you're driving, he shits all the woke stuff out of his bum. I lost it there. See, that's
it's
why I
the
don't do
first
that.
time I've ever seen you lose a train of thought ever.
It's because I'm not
We,
feeling very well. That's why we're a bit delayed. But I don't know. I was going to talk about my health again because people said, but I'm not feeling great. That's the only.
Perhaps we
That's
could
the
call
reason
it
I lost that thread.
extra edgy. We could go with news slags. News slags.
New
I'm doing a bit of a
slags.
Danny Dyer
Yeah.
thing.
I'm Danny Geezer. Welcome to New Slags. Yeah, we could do that. You could do that. Now I'd be like, welcome to Mike Stevens, 5 till
Speed it
7
up.
p.m. Don't like woke, you've come to the wrong place. And then you're my guy
Yeah.
that I bring on. And you're like, Gary, well, it's Gary Bloke. And you come on like, all right. And you just give a sort of, well, it's out of control, isn't it? I think you'd be good at that.
Absolutely. Fucking absolutely.
That's what this show basically is. I don't know why I'm pretending that's
Yeah.
not what it is. It's I'm here doing my anti-woke edgy takes, and then Paul comes on with a bit of everyman charm. And
I've
that,
got like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier called Tyson. It's a little bit out of control. So when I go to pet him, and I'm scared of him.
yeah, you're from a council estate and you've had an actual job, not in the arts. um, all right, we'll do. Well, that's all to come, guys. But for now, it's still called Dixon Cox. And before we get into the news, because people love the banter at the start, they've been commenting that on YouTube. We will get into the stories, but we also have to do our regular section, which is Ed Davey Watch, because someone tagged me today on Twitter, now X, and they say that after a big speech on Donald Trump and rejoining the EU customs union, Ed Davey visits a doggy daycare in Surrey. Of course he does. What are you doing, Ed? I'm here at the doggy daycare in Surrey. But you know what else is important? The customs union. It's like,
Well, do you know what? His theme this week has been pretending to be a politician. So just a couple of days ago, he came out and he was just announced. He just look. He stands up on stage. He's got his MPs and a couple of nerdy world types. Lib Dem types stood behind, just nodding, superciliously nodding along. And I hate to say this, Ed, but he sounds a little bit conceited sometimes. He's doing all the old '90s sort of politician poses. Not quite pointing Blair-esque. I'm not
I'm
pointing.
pointing with
I
my
wouldn't
thumb.
point. That's and saying things like he wants a new UK EU customs union to come into force by 2030, like it's 2019. He's saying, he's saying that Starmer is basically saying no to the EU in a slightly softer way than the Conservatives did, and we must form. Look, it's a busted flush, the EU, which, by the way, sounds like a ride that he would enjoy somewhere. But it is a busted flush, and it's the sort of politics that created so much division in 2019 that it just doesn't. He's like a fossil to me. And I know 2016 to 2019 period isn't actually that long ago, but it feels eons ago when you think of the rise of the sort of right wing populism. And Ed Davey just doesn't quite fit in. It's like you and I turning up at senior school with a skateboard, saying things like "rad" just to try and fit in. He doesn't fit in anymore, and the reason he doesn't fit in anymore is because he seems to mix 5% of trying to create new policies with 95% of rolling around with a Datsun on the grass in Surrey somewhere, trying to win people over. He's like, I don't know, he's like an uncle with special needs.
Yes. And That reminds me of the cop that said "Just Stop Oil" were like special needs. We don't get into that. We don't insult
No, I don't
the
want to.
special
And
needs
you know, I
community.
mean, oh my god, just all of a sudden, all the other ways that could be portrayed have come back to me. But he's like this guy. You want him to do well. You know, he does. He's not quite equipped with the tool set, and you want him to do well. And at every turn, he says something kind of ridiculous. Thinks, "Oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing." Goes back to a theme park.
Well, I don't particularly want
And
him to do
then
well, but you're nicer than me, Paul. I mean, what was your dog called? Tyson. Here's Ed Davey at the doggy daycare. So here's Tyson. He's looking for a home. Sad music. But you know who else is looking for a home? Britain, since we left the customs union. Our trade is looking for a home. It's like, all right, Ed, seems a bit tenuous to me. Why can't you do this from an office or somewhere normal? I mean, it's like the
he just
campaign's
hasn't.
over. I've said to Ed, the campaign, you don't need to touch any more dogs. You don't need to go down any more water slides. I'm Ed Davey sliding down a water chute with a dog because I've run out of ideas.
just just overly trusting this dog's ability not to bite his neck. It's like an XL bully, but he's like, "It's okay."
He just gets
okay.
Here's somebody who's not keen on the customs union. Tries to rip it out and has to go immediately to hospital for a tetanus shot. All right, that's Ed Davey. Our international listeners are going, "What the fuck? Who is Ed Davey?" And
well, we're introducing them.
yes, and anyway, we'll crack on. And because I'm not feeling that great, and people love it when I talk about that. We'll do quicker stories. Also, the stories aren't that great this week, so I think there's some interesting stuff. Still tune in, but there's no like one mammoth thing.
What a way to start the show. Stories are rich shit. I'm not feeling good about it.
I've been working
Might
with
be
Lewis
ropey.
for too long. This show is so unimportant. Okay, this is not good. Basically, there are good stories, but they're not as like monolithic as some. They're not like an hour on one, is what I'm trying to say. They're more bite sized. So we'll go through that. So what we're going to do is we'll do the Tory and Reform potential pact, which I've got some inside information on actually, and whether Suella's going to join, Suella Braverman. We've got Kemi's speech in general. We've got this national inquiry into the Grooming gang atrocity. Will it happen? More pressure on it to happen. David Lynch has very sadly died. I want to say something about that. We're going to talk about Trump and just a preview of the Trump era and also this flags story about the flags being at half mast or full mast for the inauguration. And then we're going to bring back Peak Woke by popular demand. We're going to do a little bit of Peak Woke, which if you don't know what that was, when I did my podcast with Toby Young, we always had a Peak Woke, which was competing for the most woke thing of the week. I kind of don't like it because it's what the thing I was just mocking about, like, it's Mike something 5 to 7 every night on slightly alternative channel. It's like, because I don't want to even talk about woke, because I say it's kind of over and I don't even want to give it an audience. But it is a funny section and it is backed by popular demand. So we'll do peak woke, probably do that in the paywall section. So for all that, go to nickdixon.net and it's very reasonable. And you can support this work, save the West. Someone just asked me what happens if they become a founding member. So I've got to reply to that. Not much, but you get all my content. I think I even promised a Zoom call if you're a founding member. Imagine that. So I need to just actually deliver on that. But you get all my full podcasts, and we're going to do more interviews soon. And you get all the full podcasts with me and Paul, and all my articles and loads of stuff. And you can just support this whole thing on nickdixon.net. But Paul, let's crack on. That was my advertising, hardcore marketing there. But let's crack on and start with old Kemi Badenoch is back with a speech. Another very kind of just a generic Kemi speech, really. We made mistakes. We have to acknowledge that. We are not going to come out with any policies. We are going to take a lot of time and be completely overshadowed by Nigel Farage. Like, okay, Kemi. I'm paraphrasing. That wasn't the exact speech. But she said, first, let's do the pact. So she ruled out the pact. Nigel Farage says he wants to destroy the Conservative Party. Why on earth would we merge with that? I'm working on a Kemi impression, which is probably fraught with problems. But But that's what she said. Now, I don't really believe her because I've spoken to some sources and I've been grilling my sources, and actually I can tell that some people are going to go across to reform and that some people feel the pact is inevitable, because otherwise we all know Labour and Lib Dem will merge or it's effectively by tactical voting, not actually merge, but they'll use tactical voting at the election to keep out the right and the so-called right. And so you almost feel a pact's inevitable. Then again, you could easily imagine the Tories being dumb enough not to do it and just getting destroyed and just ending up in a kind of everyone on 20% situation. But the danger is that Labour creep in again, which would be a disaster. So this pact may happen, it may not. Kemi's ruling it out. She said something else very interesting. on Farage. She said that he had a head start. Nigel Farage has been knocking around for 20 plus years. That's how she does it. Nigel Farage. He's been leading all sorts of different parties, so he has had a head start. It's like, I mean, you are the leader of the most successful party in European history, which has all the apparatus and funding. He is just a bloke with a couple of other guys from the pub. One of them's a farmer going, "Should we? What, hey up, lads! Should we fancy becoming prime minister?" I ruddy well think we should. And that's basically what you're up against. Five blokes and a dog going, tell you what, I think we can take this lot. And they probably can. That's the crazy thing. They actually are ahead in many polls. But you can hardly say Farage had a headset. Yes, on a personal level, he has more celebrity, but you are the Tory leader. So it's a bit lame. But Paul, any thoughts?
I mean, yeah, just to put a pin in that. I mean, a very recent poll today, maybe yesterday afternoon, showed Reform and the Tories neck and neck on circa 25% share of the vote each. So therefore, an aggregate of 50%, which, if a pact did come into play, that would pretty much rule out um, Labour coming back into power. So we should probably put a pin in that, and noting that 25% for either of them won't win them anything other than more time in opposition. So I think we should put a pin in that. But there were some interesting takeaways. I just made some notes from the speech the other day. She said that Labour are suffocating the spirit of enterprise. I agree with that. She said too many politicians haven't had a real job. I really agree with that. And most of Starmer's cabinet haven't worked in a business, let alone built one. And I think that's really, really important, particularly when you look around the environment, political environment, geopolitical environment we find ourselves in now. I mean, you've only got to look to America, and Trump has surrounded himself with very, very successful business people. Trump himself is a very successful. I mean, okay, we're not going to debate that here. You and I aren't going to debate whether Trump's been a successful business person or not, but he has. I mean, he has. Whether you like it or not, he has. And he's also become president twice. So I'd say that was pretty successful. And essentially, you have to be a very astute business person to have achieved the presidential wins alone. He's read the landscape and gone, this is the direction we need to go in. This is what we don't need to do. This is what we do need to do. You know, he's built essentially a business plan and delivered it. And now he's got a huge manifesto. So Labour find themselves in a world where astute business acumen is going to be really important in order to build rapport and strong relationships with those people that he needs to do that. And whether people like it or not, looking west towards the US is the only real place to look now to build strong relationships. There's no point looking south and east towards Europe. Okay, there's nothing to say. I'm not saying we ignore the EU and we ignore individually the countries within the EU. We obviously there are neighbours and there are certain business relationships that we must maintain, and I'm sure we can build on. I do not agree with Ed Davey that we should take ourselves back to the 2016-2019 period and start asking to renegotiate the EU customs deal. And what he means by that, he doesn't mean negotiate. He means capitulate to the EU and give them exactly what they want. So we're back to where we were pre the Brexit vote in 2016. That's exactly what he means. That you know, those are the sunny uplit places
Uplands.
that Ed Davey,
Sunlit uplands.
places. Yeah.
You were close.
Oh my god, so close. Not close enough though. Not quite moot, but nearly. So look, it's an important and ignore all that geopolitics stuff. At home, it's really obvious when you see them sitting around coming up with ideas that they don't come up with ideas that are in tune to not even the working. They can't identify who the working person in Britain is, by the way, because when he was asked, he basically said anyone without savings. And there are plenty of working class people that have got savings, so that doesn't make sense.
Some even
He's
have
not
gardens.
sure himself. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly, and that's a problem to him as well. I don't know quite what he's looking at, like people who live in slums somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, he is totally, excuse me, out of tune with the ordinary person, let alone the working person. The ordinary sort of 70% of people that exist within the UK. Exist, I think, being the right word, because it's a hellscape. It feels a hellscape. That there is no prosperity in this country, whatsoever. You can't look any further than the end of the week. It all looks very gloomy now, and that's not just because it's January. I mean, I keep making a list on my X profile of the things that Labour are doing day by day. It's unbelievable. You know, there were 6 or 7 things this week that, had Labour been sort of 3 or 4 years into a term, they would have been exterminated. There were nonces. There were trying to protect themselves from identifying rape gang perpetrators. There's all sorts, US election fraud, the anti-corruption minister actually being corrupt. There's just, every day there were 3 or 4 things where you think this government don't know what they're doing at all. So we're seeing that now in 6-7 months in, and we're looking ahead at another 4 years of this shit. And most people, I think, even a lot of Labour supporters, will be looking at this thinking this is hell on earth. And it's a long time between now and the next general election, because they're not going to call one, of course. And because they're so out of tune, and we'll cover this later, I'm sure. You only have to look at the local inquiries.
We'll get on to
And we'll
after
get to that
the
later.
Kemi thing.
But that is political brinkmanship, and we'll get back to that in a bit. That's not being in tune with what people are concerned about. That is going, oh shit, we've got this wrong. We need to do something that makes us look okay. But like I say, and you say, we'll get to that.
But hang on. So, I mean, we could have even talked about Rachel Reeves, because she's in a lot of trouble as well. But how does that tie back into Kemi? Because you're saying that Labour is so crap, but she's not really taking advantage.
Well, almost certainly. So that would be my second point on this, is that Kemi Badenoch has not done anything yet substantial that makes anybody sit up, listen. Okay, she said a lot of good things. Arguably, it's very easy to say good things. I'm good friends with a Lib Dem politician, and I exchanged a few messages over this week. And I admit, I said to her, it's much easier to sit on this side and talk nonsense about politics on a daily basis rather than do it. That's why the most successful politicians do so well, because they're able to cut through and win hearts and minds of people that don't even support them. Kemi Badenoch's got a great opportunity at the moment, in the sense that she is the opposition leader, and she could take what Labour are doing, which is just diabolical, turn it around, show the nation exactly how bad that is, and show us a way forward. But unfortunately for her, she might be the Conservative leader and the leader of the opposition, but she's not the Conservative voice of the UK. The Conservative voice of the UK is Nigel Farage. That's who people are looking to. They're not looking to Kemi Badenoch and saying, oh, what is it you're going to do, Kemi? They're looking to Nigel Farage and saying, Nige, tell us how we're going to get out of this. And just somewhere shouting over his shoulder is Kemi Badenoch, who seems to do these kind of lectures every couple of weeks, and they don't make a great deal of sense.
Well,
and they're not really put into action because no one's really stood behind her.
Well, on this point, Farage tweeted, a total of 21 people are currently watching Kemi Badenoch's speech on Facebook, and her YouTube stream crashed. It's a good job she understands the digital age. Now, I don't know if that was even technically true, but it felt true, which is probably enough. I mean, as you say, unlike with Trump in the US, the Tories didn't manage to incorporate Farage. It would have been the smart thing to do. They may end up doing it if this pact happens. In a way, it is them incorporating Farage, but on his terms, and really the Tories crawling to reform when they had plenty of chances to welcome him in. And this is all he ever wanted, really, as a Thatcherite. They could have welcomed him in. The equivalent would have been very much like Trump. He would have taken over the party. It'd been much harder to do in our system, but he would have taken over the party. Instead, he's had to form his own party. And it just feels, as you say, or as you pretty much are broadly saying, it feels as if Farage is the leader. Kemi's never felt like a leader at all to me. I'm sure she's got many qualities, but she doesn't feel like a leader to me. I think Jemmett would have been a better choice, but not that he was like a great charismatic leader either. They've really drained all the charisma out of their party. Their last charismatic leader was Boris. He was a disaster and was responsible for the Boris wave and the lockdowns. So Boris is dead to me. But that's last time. I've said this before. The last time they had a charismatic leader with substance was Thatcher. So They're quite hard to come by. This is why many people have said I should run. But Kemi, you're right. Her speech was criticised for having no real policies. I don't really see what the point of it was. It didn't do much, she ruled out the pact. She said that Farage had a head start. One thing she did, which we can get onto, is she said migrants not interested in integration should not be here. That's the Telegraph's headline. And she says, our country is our home. It is not a hotel. And just to park that for a second, I think an obvious criticism there, which I couldn't be bothered making on GB News in case Josh went off on one of his rants calling everyone racist. But it, she touched down in the country, was born here, then left, then came back at 16 because there were too many problems in Nigeria. That's kind of treating the country a bit like a hotel, you could argue. So I don't think she's on the strongest ground there. And she said if people arriving don't want to integrate into British culture, they shouldn't be here, and it's not controversial to say that. That is correct. And I'm glad she's saying it now. She was in trouble because in 2018, she praised Sajid Javid, who was Home Secretary at that time? She said,
Yeah.
is that right? She said, whatever. Anyway, he was there at that time. She said she praised him for removing annual limits on work visas and also on international students. And she said both of which I lobbied for. This was in 2018. It's this famous clip that went around. Now, she said that was desperate, people sharing that clip, because in 2022, when she ran as leader, she completely changed her mind on that. And you can change your mind, and Jemik also changed his mind, to me more convincingly, because he resigned over Rwanda. And I felt he got properly red-pilled on immigration, and he's there tweeting like dodgy accounts on X and stuff. I think he went fully like memed up. I believe Jeremy really went red, because once you realize immigration's an absolute disaster, you're bound to start asking other questions, and before you know it, you're just a full-on racist. So that's what that's what.
Yeah, he feels
just
like
joking, Robert. Don't sue me. He's a great guy, I'm sure, but he went fully memed up. Go on, Paul.
no, it does feel like he's been red pilled to some degree, and he has sort of raced slightly towards the right and hasn't quite figured out yet which parts of the right would be politically astute to line yourself with in order to win public popularity. So I think sometimes, some of the things that he's quoted or some of the things that he's retweeted um, show
He's
that
not going to
me.
join Reform. He's going to go straight to the Homeland Party. He'll be going straight to. He's like, we're former lefties. He like follow me on. He'll have his own He'll have his own show, just a sort of England flag in the background.
Well, I like geese and I like walking, so I don't really see what the problem with goose stepping is.
Not that we're aligning any. I don't know much about these parties. We're not aligning them with Nazis, of course.
We don't.
We're just simply saying
we don't.
Robert Jenrick will become far right and have a small YouTube show that will get banned from YouTube, and he'll have to do it on his own streaming network. It's absolutely disaster. But I'm Robert Jenrick. You can find me on, we just, those weird like on Iliad.org, and you're like, that's not a site. No. Sorry. Anyway, I'm going to digression there. But Jenrick went properly. Yeah, he went properly red pill. Kemi. Okay, she's changed her mind on immigration, but she's associated with the Boris wave. She's associated with even saying, let's have more Boris wave. She's too associated with immigration. She herself calls herself essentially a first generation immigrant. So that's not me being a big racist in this case. That's something she said, though of course I am a big racist, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
So, Paul, did you find them convincing on migration, or what can she do on this? Because she has to outflank Starmer and Farage. And actually, Starmer is to the right of Kemi on this, because he said that the Tories, it was deliberate, it was by design. They flooded the country with useless bloody immigrants. I'm paraphrasing, but, it's hard for her to position herself on this.
Yeah, he did some sort of generic thing there, where it's like he found a right wing YouTuber and said, "What should I say on this?" And
it was by design
on the two geezers podcast.
Should I say replacement? That sounds a bit strong. It was a great replacement. Let's change the words slightly. It was by design. Yeah, it's like, okay, you've gone far right. You're a far right thug.
Yeah, get Gary Bloke from the Two Geezers podcast just to give me some words for this speech. Gary, no worries, kid, no fucking worries, mate. Tyson, get down, and he's like just
I love this new character.
making some notes for him to say, and he reads them. And this a little bit is what's happening with Kemi as well, because she says some really interesting things on immigration. She seems to have got a real good grip on it, and obviously, she's a person of colour, which by which I mean she's black. You're allowed to say that, by the way. And
Yeah, because we were
she
going to say, well, I was going to say
she
which color, and you came in, you said it, so that's fine.
yeah. So
But don't
and
call her Nigerian because she's actually Yoruba, and she doesn't even want to be called Nigerian. As she said in Spectator, the people in the north are my ethnic. Is it in the north? They're my ethnic enemies. She used the phrase "ethnic enemies," which is about as far right as it gets. Paul, she's a far right
exactly.
Yoruba warrior.
And by the way, we often get called racist in places like the UK. We are nowhere near as racist as anyone who's had a house share with a South African and an Australian will tell you that we're not even 1%
You need to
racist
get those
compared
rookie
to.
numbers up.
We're absolutely outrageous, and it's like part of their charm. Don't worry, they all live in Clapham. It doesn't matter. It's like, no, look at them. Don't look at me. But what's happening with Kemi Badenoch is that she's got a few contradictions. You know, it's the. I think it was Peter Hitchens when on the Trigonometry podcast when he was talking about the Marxist, socialist,
We don't need to mention
communist side of.
other podcasts on
Yeah,
here.
sorry,
It's
Nick.
all right.
Of all the
I'm going to have to go
podcasts,
because
I mean,
I'm going to go through bleep that out now, and I
yeah.
might be physically sick. Just kidding.
But it's. I didn't need to mention it, but
Anyways, on
hello
another
to the boys.
podcast that was
Yeah,
may or may
so-
not have been stolen from people on this podcast. Man, we don't know. Go on.
So Peter Hitchens was saying on there that the reason the right are unable to really get on top and criticise the left is they don't understand the politics that sits behind it. That what we should be able to do is we should be able to look at a politician and find out how they arrived at the journey they took to arrive at the position that they're in now. And if you look at Keir Starmer, it's absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying for someone like me because he's left of Corbyn. And I find Corbyn abhorrent, genuinely abhorrent. His politics, his communism to me, I cannot compute. It would take us to a place that I think is extremely dark and dangerous for the UK. And he is left of that in many ways. And we're seeing that come out. And he stood behind this whole lawyer thing, which I think is terrifying. You know, there's some sort of legal eroticism about Keir Starmer. But what we don't really understand with like the Genricks and the Badenochs is quite how they got to the point they're at, or they don't understand quite enough how they got to the point. It's a little bit too populist. So Kemi says things that sound right and then demonstrates things that contradict it. Robert Jenrick comes from a position where he was quite far to the left of the Conservative Party and has done a big old swing to the right and is not quite sure how he got there and is saying some things that don't quite make sense and all like that. And then you've got Keir Starmer, who's pretending to be to the right on immigration. And the only person that really, and this is why it keeps coming back to the same man, Nigel Farage, the only person who really understands the immigration problem is Nigel Farage. And even Nigel now, and the Reform Party and the way he's taking it, seems to be a little left-leaning again. So it seems we seem to get to a certain point with it, and then people just step back because, it sounds a bit harsh. It's against our sensibilities. And I get it. I'm someone who came from a working-class, Labour-supporting background to what is now, I would have considered myself a centrist and now a right-of-centre person who is primed to vote Reform, essentially, because no other party at this moment in time offers anything near what I'd be looking for from politics. And in fact, I'd wipe it all clean. And the worry for me, and I'm kind of coming round to the way you think about Nigel Farage. So
Red
the
pilling
more he
Paul every
speaks,
week.
you're just it's just chipping away. I think Nigel is the hope, by the way. I genuinely believe the Reform Party and Nigel Farage are the hope. But it does feel to me that no one's really got the conviction to deliver the solution on immigration. And the solution for immigration is to shut the border down, deport people that shouldn't be here, and take a break. Simple as that. It's so simple. Now, the reason people will argue that it's not simple is because of the impact on the economy. But we don't know that by doing that would impact the economy. You've got no economy if you've got no culture, because if you've got a culture that doesn't understand itself and doesn't know what it's working towards, then why go and fucking work? We've got massive swathes of ordinary working people in the UK of all different backgrounds who have no idea what they identify with anymore, and because they don't know what they identify with anymore, they got nothing to work towards. They're like, I don't,
Yeah.
there's no exist. We've taken out religion. We've taken out Christianity from the UK. We've taken out belief in our own culture, belief in being British. We've taken that away. That's bad. And people are just left with this huge void. And people like Starmer have deliberately created this void and are trying to come up with a way to give us something to believe in. And we don't believe in him whatsoever. And the actors that are around him, we don't believe in. And the opposition to it at the moment is very difficult. Kemi Badenoch is yet to prove herself. Obviously, Robert Jenrick's not in power, and Nigel Farage is just stood there, and he's who most people are looking towards for a solution. But of course, we still have no idea what Farage and the Reform Party are going to be able to do outside of the immigration issue.
Yeah.
There's a much bigger cultural issue that needs to be tackled, I think, Nick.
You're absolutely right. I've said this. The idea that growth would just be just brilliant and just smashing growth when every other aspect of the country is falling apart is so unrealistic. I mean, DEI itself is something that destroys growth and destroys motivation, and you let the wrong people are hired. And as you say, if we don't know who we are, also if our wages are going to social housing, people are coming into the country, certain groups disproportionately on social housing. Our money goes straight to them. You're a sort of mug if you're one of the very few. We have about half the country, just under half now, are actually net tax contributors. So we have we're just the mugs doing that. And I don't think about it too much because you've got to work anyway. But if you did think about it too long, especially people coming into the country and they go straight on benefits and social housing, it's insane. Yeah, the idea that you'd have a collapsing country with no identity that's thriving economically is an absurdity, I think. And on Farage, yes, you can get criticised here. Lee Hurst has unfollowed me. I notice he's very upset about people not sticking to the reform mess.
Lee's incredibly passionate about Nigel
Yeah,
and the Reform Party. He sees zero solution elsewhere, and he might be right,
yeah.
but
He sees it as the only chance, and he thinks get behind it. Whereas what I'll do is I'll just tell it as I see it. If Farage is doing something wet, like his bizarre comments on Islam or on remigration, then I'll say it. And a lot of people are suspicious about who Zia Yusuf is and why he's popped up. Farage was even talking about letting Shamima Begum back in the country. So there's been all this stuff. Is it because of the pact with the Tories? Is he moderating himself? We don't know why he's moderating himself. He's very shrewd, so I'm sure there's some plan. I go team Rupert Lowe just because Rupert just says exactly what I'm thinking and is still an MP. He's still there. He's keeping it mainstream, but he's just pushing the Overton window. As I've said, it's not that it's not that it's not about going to the right. It's how far you can represent the people when the Westminster elite are so out of touch, and they're so out of touch that they're way out of alignment with the people. So to me, the game is: do you have the courage to be more in alignment with the people? I've said it before, but things like people are pro death penalty for certain heinous crimes. People are wildly more anti-immigration than any politician has ever been, with perhaps the exception of Enoch Powell, who was then booted out. So it's like, do you have that? Do you have that courage? And Rupert Lowe seems to have the courage. He'll get up in the House of Commons and ask about the grooming gangs. He'll just ask a series of brutally damning questions that are actually having female politicians actually crying out in agony in the Commons, while he just
that was
goes,
very
"And here's
performative.
another question:
So
what are you doing
performative.
about this? And what do you do about this? And this? And what about it?" He's like, bang, bang, bang. It reminded me a little bit of Churchill in Darkest Hour. Whatever you think to Churchill, they kind of idealized Churchill in Darkest Hour. It's like, here's a slightly disheveled bloke just wandering into the comments, just going, bang, how about this? Like, and all the others are going, oh no, you can't say that. And he's just going, what do you do about this? What do you do about this? It's just like, and that was one of the great speeches. But it was just a very simple list of questions. But yeah, Farage, I worry about, has he gone too soft? But I'm trying to bring it back to the point of so that's Kemi Badenoch on migration and her speech in general and the pact in general. The only thing I haven't added is Suella Braverman said she was not ruling out
Yeah.
joining. It was a bit of a nothing thing when you watch the interview. It was a bit of a non-answer. She's like, "Well, I've got a lot of friends in Reform. My husband's part of Reform. Obviously, something's afoot. I mean, people are going to be joining Reform or joining this pact. Something's going to happen closer to the election."
She said, Suella says, there is not space for two Conservative parties. And she's right. There isn't really. And Nigel Farage is essentially an archetypal Conservative leader of the centre right. So he's occupying the space that someone like Kemi Badenoch needs to occupy, but can't because there's a squatter there. And she did say that, and this is why it's a problem and why Nigel is managing to do so well. She also said that Tories have been hurt by the Reform Party, by which she means lots of her, colleagues lost uh, lost out in the last general election, not necessarily to Reform. They might have lost to Labour or the Lib Dems, but they lost because Reform took away a lot of the Conservative vote because, that's growing. And that's another reason why someone like Suella Braverman would want a pact. Now, we've said this before, I live in Suella Braverman's constituency. I'm a constituent of hers. And anecdotally, and it's not like I socialise with people that vote a certain way or have similar views. Most of my friendship group formed a long time before I became a satirist or political commentator. And therefore, I don't always know everybody's politics. It's not the first question I asked by any stretch of the imagination. But anecdotally, locally, a lot of people would be happy with Reform. In Waterlooville, where I live, there is a guy who stands on the major roundabout in Waterlooville in a skull mask, waving a flag, a GB flag with Nigel Farage and the Reform Party written on it. It says nothing else. And he's been there since the general election in like June, July, and is there regularly and just waves. You can look this guy up, and if you go past that roundabout and he's there, he gets a lot of beeps of support. Now, I don't know the guy. Maybe he knows me. There's a chance that he knows me because he probably watches GB News.
I love that you live in the most gammony area, the people's gammon, the most BB, hey, Nigel, hey, just like holding.
Right. So my point I'm trying to make here is that it's somewhere that's rural in parts. So there's farming here. It's town. It's Waterlooville town centre. Is one of the places that when you want to do a news story about how the high street has fallen from grace and everything's very depressing, they'll go to Waterlooville town centre and they'll show it. Now, Suella Braverman is doing a lot to help the local councils change that, and they're doing some good work. But essentially, it's downtrodden, it's part rural, and it's everything that the Labour Party has forgotten about. Let's not forget, right? Let's not forget at all. Labour Party are London-centric. They might have MPs all over the place, but largely they're in urban metropolitan areas, right? They don't give a fuck about farming. They don't understand the countryside, and they care for the stuff that goes on in big cities, which is often very liberal and very woke. And it's so disconnected. So there are lots of towns like Waterlooville all over the country that are very downtrodden. And there are people, I live some people might argue that this is an oxymoron, but I live in a nice part of Waterlooville. And there are lots of places of Waterlooville where I would imagine that people aren't poor. There are a lot of places that are, like there are in a lot of towns around the UK. So it's not for a lack of money and a lack of disposable income. It's just no one's got any money now. No one. 14 years of Tories, and now we're ending into this sort of socialist borrow, spend, give it to people who want their willies removed and vaginas put in. And it makes no sense.
Didn't see that coming. I've only just fully processed how far out you live. You're like 85 miles from me, and you live on the sea, basically. I didn't really realise you still lived out there near Portsmouth. And I think I've done a gig in Havant, or maybe I haven't.
You probably have.
No
Yes.
pun. I mean, it was a pun, but of some sort. But yeah, I feel like I didn't know you live so far down there. Anyway, I don't want to get digressed too much on the podcast, but you're way out in the sea. It's interesting that Suella Braverman. I forgot that. Does that make any difference to your life? Because we have obviously I've got Labour here, and the Greens came second. If you can imagine such a thing.
No, it doesn't make any tangible, measurable difference to my life at all.
We should probably stop talking about politics.
Yeah,
wasting our life.
I mean, I guess the point I was trying to make, because Portsmouth's just down the road, and that's half Labour, half Lib Dems, and my friend is the MP for Chichester, and that's Lib Dem. And by the way, the other thing we forget is behind a lot of these leaders are some very hard-working MPs of all different party colours. It's not an easy job. Having now got a friend that is an MP, you get to see the stuff that they have to do. It's unbelievable. Often, by the way, at their own expense.
Yeah.
Because you can't claim the expenses that you used to have to. And if you take your team with you to an event and they need a drink or something to eat or they need to get there, it'll come out the kitty. And often that's being put forward by the MP. Now, you might say, well, the MP earns 90 grand a year. Well, okay, smashing. That's like 50 grand a year after tax. And if you're spending 20 grand of that on helping your team out with expenses, you're not earning that much. You really aren't,
No.
and you work 7 days a week.
It looks mad what they have to do. I always end up coming back to, they always end up at GB News anyway. That's their ultimate goal. I'm already there. So what's the point of becoming an MP? You know what I mean? It's so
Yeah.
depressing when they. I always feel like the that old joke about the clown, but Doctor I am Pagliacci. Like, well, it's like I'm already at GB News. So I'm already doing. Some people say go and be an MP, and it's like, well, MPs all just want to go to GB News because it's such a miserable life. Yeah, I do understand they do a lot, and
So people can. I think I didn't even finish my point, Nick, and I should
you
really.
should finish my
I
point.
think I could see somewhere like if Suella jumped from the Tories to Reform, in her constituency, that wouldn't be a major issue, not at all. And I think there's probably a bunch of Tory and Labour MPs that the same would be true for them.
All right. Well, let's move on. We've done probably longer than I meant to on that one, but we had some banter in there. Let's move on and do this grooming gang inquiry, rape and torture gang, really, but they're known as the grooming gangs. So the Mail has Labour blasted over toothless grooming gang probes, and basically Starmer is refusing to do a national inquiry on this, even though many of his own party want it. Sarah Champion, after doing a weird emotional riposte to Rupert Lowe in the House of Commons, even though she was one of the original people that broke this grooming gang thing and actually had to
Yeah,
step
Rotherham
down
MP.
because of the Rotherham thing, because of a piece in the Sun about it. She came out all like, "Oh, your language was terrible," but then she has backed the national inquiry. Andy Burnham's backed it. Richard Bergen, whatever he's called, they're basically the same person. They've all backed it. So many of Starmer's own party are backing it, and there are technical reasons for wanting it. So you can, if you just do these local inquiries, you can't compel witnesses to attend. You can't take evidence under oath, and you can't requisition written evidence. Those are some of the reasons. And what Yvette Cooper is saying is she's going to use this new duty of candor, which is this Labour thing where you have a legal duty on public servants to tell the truth. But it doesn't sound anywhere near as tough. It's like, guys, you've got to tell the truth, by the way. It's like, well, it's not quite the same as
Bullshit.
oath, is it? So it sounds a bit lame. And there are various reasons for wanting this. I think also there's just a national need for it on a gut level, on the kind of level I see things at the layman's level, which is just we need people punished and we need a purge and we need a kind of healing nationally if we can ever have that from such a horrific event. And it's just a gesture. It's just politics. It's important, but it's also politically a no-brainer to me because there's such need for it, and people want it even in the Labour Party. So I think it's almost inevitable. But Starmer's doing what he does. He's being stubborn and not allowing it. I mean, am I right, Paul, or am I missing something?
Well, I know that there was one person in the comments said that neither of us challenge each other enough, and we need a third party
Did someone
to come
say
and
that?
challenge
Well, I
our
think
views.
you're full of shit, Paul.
Yeah, I think you're full of shit as well.
Someone said you had your headphones on the wrong way around the other time, so I'm going to challenge you on that.
I did, yeah, and I do.
You do again.
They're right, actually, and the reason that I do is because I want them to be. I want the cable to be that way. I'm not explaining myself to you, anonymous commenter.
But I'm challenging you, Paul. I'm challenging you on your headphones.
But they're not all comments are wrong.
There's no point challenging
But
me
not
because
all
I'm right on everything. I'm always right. But anyway,
Well,
go ahead.
I agree with you. I agree with you on the national inquiry. I agree with you on a lot of things. And the point of this podcast is for us just to talk about it, by the way. And that's what we do.
We don't need balance. This idea we need balance. Like everyone, we are the balance to everything else. I don't believe in balance.
Well,
the whole world is one way and we're
balance-
the one thing the other way. That's your balance. You don't need some lefty on the show. Some people think I think I saw a comment, we need a lefty on the show. We don't need a lefty on the fucking show. I'm sorry.
Fuck them. Well, and balance is the bedrock of DEI.
Yeah, I hate balance.
What are you asking for, you woke prick?
Yeah, you woke
Anyway.
prick. Balance. Actually, to be honest, one defining characteristic of the right is that the right doesn't believe in equality because equality rules out freedom. You can't have them both. If you're free, things will naturally be unequal because people are unequal. So we don't have to have everything equal and balanced, you lefty. Yeah, fucking lefties. Anyway, so Paul.
Yeah,
so national inquiry, you agree with
national
me?
inquiries. So what we've got here is pure and utter political brinkmanship from the Labour Party because they don't want to be seen to have lost any ground to everybody else, essentially, and they don't want to be seen to do any form of U-turn. So they've come up with 5, which is barely 10%. Conservatively, we think that there's at least 50 towns that have got these rape gangs in. So 5, arbitrarily chosen by the looks of it, local inquiries is just a long walk into the tall grass. Essentially, they're kicking the can down the road. And what this does is it doesn't fix anything. We still don't know what powers they're going to have. At least I don't think we do, unless things have changed in the last 24 hours. But we don't know what powers they're going to have. So we don't know if they can just call these people in. We don't know what transparency we're going to get. We don't know if we're going to see any public version of this inquiry. We don't know how long it's going to take. And what we're supposed to rely on here is the word of a politician, which got us into this position in the first place. The reason we are here is because of politicians and officials, because they were terrified and their word stood for nothing. So I see this as pure brinkmanship, and I see this as an insult to what's being asked for. And I would just swipe it to one side. £10 million as well they put aside for it. And you saw the figures yesterday that since Labour come in, the funding that's gone towards Pakistan is now £134 million a year in aid to Pakistan. Okay, which we already know is where a lot of these rapists come from. So we're giving them £134 million. They're investing that in their country and keeping the best in their country and sending us their rapists. And now we're spending £10 million on investigating what the cultural drivers are, which, by the way, I think is the politically correct term for Deliveroo drivers. Cultural drivers. I mean, what are they? We know what the cultural drivers are. We don't need to spend £10 million to identify that this is racism against white, disenfranchised girls. We know this already. It's not an anecdote. It's not just right-wing populists saying, oh, this is exactly what... Everybody agrees on this. Everybody agrees on this. And if they don't, they're co-conspirators or they're complicit in the rape and torture of these girls. And this is who we should be focusing on here. I watched back a little bit of our last episode, and you and I got really quite upset about this, and rightly so. And so did a lot of our viewers and listeners. Some people had to listen again. Some people had to turn off and come back to it. It's harrowing stuff. And this is a smack in the face. I think what we have to keep doing is we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep pushing, and we have to keep doing that until the survivors get the justice and that we prevent any current and future victims of these perpetrators, these rapists, these
I was talking to an MP,
heinous fucking idiots,
who I like, but I even got the sense that they didn't quite know and understand the full scope of the anger about this. Or you could say I'm wrong and I'm in an echo chamber on Twitter, but my feeling was they hadn't quite grasped, because they see it politically, and as you know, it's, as we've said, it's complicated being an MP. But I just said, well, there has to be a national inquiry because there's so much anger about it, and I just don't think that's been fully grasped by everyone yet. It certainly hasn't been grasped by Starmer yet.
Hand it over. And I don't mean this politically, although it would be very politically charged to do so. But if you are on the left of politics and it looks as if you are complicit in this because you did fuck all about it, hand it over to Reform, to organise the inquiry. If you are not scared at all, hand it over to Reform and say, you organise this inquiry, you get what you want from it, and we'll stand behind the outcomes, because that would be complete and utter transparency. Okay, because it doesn't matter which side of this investigates the issue, they are going to find things we already know, and that's not what we're interested in. Why did it happen? Who were the perpetrators? Who were the people that protected them? Who were the officials? Who were the MPs? Who were the police officers that stood back and let this happen because they protected their own careers, because they were scared of being called racist? We need to identify who those people are, because unless you remove that rot from the system will keep going, and you'll end up with this continuing. And I don't want this to be water. I don't want these waters to be muddied by this. Oh, well, 90% of rapists are white men. Yeah, fuck it. We know that, you dickhead. What we're talking about here is a very, very specific issue which we have imported and it stands without scrutiny and is able to perpetuate because of DEI, because of multiculturalism, and because of the woke mind virus. And there you go. There's all the
And you have to
buzzwords for
change.
you.
Yes, well, it's a good rant. You have to change your immigration policy because the idea is like, well, yes, they'll rape a certain number of children, and we don't know which ones will do it. But economic benefits that also don't exist. It's like, what could possibly be on the flip side of that coin? There's nothing they could do to warrant it. So we have to actually look at this and say we can't actually take certain people. But I don't know. That's a big conversation. But we need to
By the
do that.
way,
Go on.
we know full well that the Labour Party stand to lose a lot from this. Keir Starmer personally stands to lose a lot
Yeah,
from
because
this.
these are all
But
Labour
that's not to
areas
say
where this has gone on most as Labour areas, and they'll lose a Muslim vote.
exactly. So they should be nowhere near the inquiry. Nowhere near the inquiry. And don't give me your word because your word means nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you know what? We might find out that there were Tories and Lib Dems and you know, white right wing populists that prevented this as well because they were scared of being called. Who cares? Let's find out.
Yeah.
We don't have to we don't have to we don't have to um, vilify these people. Let's find out and let's stop it happening again. Now, I'll say you don't have to vilify these people. There are definitely a group of people out there that have been getting away with this for far too long that should be vilified. And I would support prison sentences for people that definitely stood in the way of justice here
Yeah. And I would say
because
more,
there
but
are
you already
tens of
covered it,
thousands of
as Paul
victims.
said in that epic 2-hour episode. I'm just feeling so rough. I think maybe I'm just so drained by all of this stuff, but I just
Yeah.
can't. I've said everything I got to say in those previous episodes. If you want to listen, obviously I would be doing the death penalty. I've said it's one of the great atrocities we've ever faced in this country or any country, and I don't think people have fully reckoned with it. And that, to me, if there was a full inquiry, it would take down our whole current ruling elite, it'd probably take down the Labour and the Tories because it's such. It's like a genocide that's been covered up, and now people still don't want to talk about it in case they're called racist, even though a genocide has happened. That's the level it's on. It happens to be rape rather than murder. Some people did die. It happens to be rape and horrific torture. But the closest thing is a genocide. It's a racially motivated mass rape and torture on a with details that are beyond almost imagination when you read them. It's so horrific, and we find that all these lefties on who come on GB News and things like that, they don't read the court transcripts. So it's like you don't know what you're talking about. You're not facing up to this problem. So it's like trying to sweep a genocide under the carpet. A country can't do that. So it will come out and at some point, and it already is now on because of Elon Musk and so on. And it can't be. There's no way to resist it. It's a tidal wave of anger coming. I've said, and there's no way to resist it. All right.
Yeah, again, like you just said, go back and listen to our last episode from last week, or watch it last week. I'm just talking about this now. I can feel my blood boil.
Yeah.
And we need to remove anybody who's slightly in favour of who is so entrenched and merged within the DEI, multiculturalism, diversity is our strength movement. They can't be part of this. And that's not to say that's not to discredit all those things. You can have another debate on that if you want, but they have to be removed from this investigation because they are entirely blinkered. They are the people that will say we've discovered this, but and there'll be a dot 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 and piles and piles of bullshit that will undermine everything. So we just have to have the raw data and have it transparent and talk about it.
I know, and there were people on
Simple as
Question
that.
Time saying, "Oh, but let's not be smearing all Muslims." Like, it's not really the
No,
time for
oh,
that
not true.
point. Like, can we actually talk about the victims first? I mean, and they're still obsessed with Elon Musk. It's really pathetic. But at least Liam Halligan was on Question Time,
Yeah, he did
telling the
great. He
truth.
did really well.
All right, that is pretty much the free show. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Please subscribe and like the video if you like this kind of thing. Subscribe to the channel, and if you're listening on the apps, thank you very much. We are going to go over to nickdixon.net for the whole thing, so you can subscribe there. It's not very expensive, and it literally saves the West just by subscribing. You can find Paul at Paul Cox Comedy, as he helpfully has in the background there. I'm at Nick Dixon Comic. I should change it, but it lets me say I was just joking, guys. It says comic. All right.
Satire.
Anything you want to say, Paul, to the freebie people?
No, just thanks very much. Keep supporting us. Keep putting in ridiculous comments down below because they feed our bants, which we know you love.
Yes, but don't say anything negative about me or you will be blocked. All right. Thanks, guys.